Angela Wolf here, and today I want to talk about different waistbands for leggings. You've seen me sew the elastic and flip it under, but what if you want a nice waistband where it almost looks like pants? This is elastic, but you would never know it because there aren't all the wrinkles here. So let me show you how to alter any pattern to get this fabulous waistband. So here is my pants pattern that I'm using, and I'm using crazy wild fabric because I think that would be a lot of fun. One tip is to line up your seams on the inseam and the outside leg seam. When you have a crazy print like this, you want it to line up. So here's a very simple solution. Take your pattern and find a spot along the fabric. I know on knits it's a little bit difficult to find the grain line, but on this one, I have a line that goes across in different areas. And what I'm gonna do is line up my hem with that. So if I were to take this right along the grain line here, line both pieces up on the grain line, and then find a spot and line it up at the hem. Then you know when you cut out your pants, you're all good to go. So what about that waistband? What I do for the waistband is I measure. Now for this pant, this is where it will be sewn. So take out the seam allowances, and you'll take out this dart, which you're gonna see that later, but you take those measurements, and here is my pants. If you can see past this crazy fabric, here's my waistband. So what I've done here is I've taken out the dart, I've taken out the front area, so this fits perfectly. It stretches, so you don't need to have a lot of extra fabric. If your fabric doesn't stretch, that's a whole different ballgame. But this stretches, so I know it's gonna go over my hips, and it's gonna fit nice and tight to the waist. So you're gonna take this measurement all the way around, and that's where I come up with, this is my waistband. And I cut the waistband, if you can see here, a little bit wider than my elastic, so I have extra fabric to cut when it goes to the serger. So here's my waistband, measured to the same, and then here's my elastic. What I do is I put the elastic around my waist, make sure it's nice and tight, and then I've already sewn this. So that's the waist that's going to fit into this measurement. You can see that it's almost the same exact measurement of the entire waistband. The reason is because now this can fit over my hips but still come back into my waist, and you don't end up with all that excess fabric. So let me show you how to sew this. Here I have the waistband. I've already sewn it to the right exact measurements, pressed the seam allowance open, so that's the center back. Let's mark the center front, and I have two little snips here. You can see there's a snip right here as well. I'm just gonna mark that with the purple so you can see it a little bit better. That's the center front, and that's the center back. For my elastic, this black thread is the center back, and this is the center front. So you'll be able to follow along. So we're gonna sew that, but before we go sit down, I just wanna show you one more thing once I have the pants sewn. So what I have is the inseam and the outside leg seam is sewn. I'm gonna go over to the iron, and I like to do all of this in one step. I'm gonna turn up my hem, which is about an inch. I already have it marked on here. And you're gonna give it a little pressing. So that way, once you go to the sewing machine and serger, you don't have to come back to the iron. Give it a little, the clapper. It makes a nice crease on these knits. And you can see now when I get ready to sew the hem, I just flip that up, and it's very simple to do. Let's go to the sewing machine. So here's my waistband, the finished one. The first thing I wanna do is I'm going to make a casing. So I'm gonna line up the back here and flip this fabric over, just in half. Before I go to the serger, I like to do this on the sewing machine. That way if I make any mistakes, it's easy to rip out. So just follow along here. I'm flipping this around, and then I'll lay it flat. Okay, so my elastic is inside. I'm gonna put a little pin just to keep everything organized. Back around to the front. I know that this should match right here. Now, one thing I'm doing is I'm not attaching the fabric to the elastic. The elastic will be free. You'll see that in just a second. So here is the edge of my elastic where my thumb is. I'm going to stitch right next to it, okay? And all I'm gonna use is a basting stitch. So I'm gonna make the stitch 5.0, and I'm just going to stitch around this, enclosing the elastic. And there's a little trick to do with your hand to keep this going. I'm using orange thread so you can follow along, and I'm lining up the edge of the presser foot with the elastic. You'll be able to feel that, and if you're not real sure, you can pin it around and use your pen, but this is just so much easier. Just go slow. So as I'm stitching, I can feel, what I'm doing is I'm tucking the elastic all the way to the fold, and I can feel the edge of the foot touching. And again, don't stretch your fabric, just let the machine do its work. Once you get real good at this, you can just run this through the serger, but I'd rather not have extra thread going around the waistband and then attaching to the pants. It's just a lot. Stitch around here. And a little bit further, all the way around. And there's one little thing when you get back to the other side, just to make sure that your elastic doesn't roll. Now this is what they would say is a non-roll, more of a sports elastic. And you can tell the difference if you look at different elastics. It doesn't twist and turn, but it's nice and soft. So let me just show you what I did here is I stitched right up here. It's a basting stitch, so I can rip it out later, or I can, put it in with a regular color so you can't see it. But what that does is that keeps the elastic right in place. So I have my snips, and I have my seam showing the front and the back. Now I'm going to take my pants. This is a fun fabric. I can hardly wait to wear this. With black boots and a black sweater, I'll be good to go. All right, find my snip here. All right, there's the front. Here's my front seam, and I'm just going to pin that in place. I don't like using too many pins when it comes to the serger, so I'm going to use a bright color at the end to make sure you don't serge over that, because there is a knife. And then here's my back. And this is like attaching any other waistband. There should not be a lot of extra fabric when you pull out. So when I stretch this just a little bit, if I just move my fingers over, the waistband is almost the same exact width as the body of the pants. I'm going to do it here too. And this is the trick. This is how you can sew this on. The elastic fits over your hips, but you don't end up with all that extra fabric that I keep mentioning. So let's go to the serger. And I'm just going to start just on one edge and just start serging. And the idea is that I want to cut off the fabric and get the thread, this is a 4-thread overlock, as close to that orange stitching as I can. So I'm trying not to serge over the elastic, I'm serging right next to it. I'm being very careful to move the body of the pants out of the way. And I'm just going to serge off. And let's go back over here. I'll show you what we have. So there's the waistband. You can see my basting stitches. And when it flips up, I have a nice looking band. It looks like a real waistband, but it has stretch. So the secret is there's not all the extra bulk. It'll stretch over the areas that it needs to stretch and pull back. And that's where that 4-thread overlock comes in. So what about the hem? Let me just quickly show you about the hem. I actually have a different fabric because I think you'll see better. But remember where we pressed up that hem? All I would have to do is tuck this in and stitch. That's the reason for the pressing before you sit down. You can literally make these pants in an hour or less. So here's my hem on blue fabric. I'm going to turn it right side out. Actually, no, I'm going to turn it inside out. If your machine is up above, you can pull out the side and this will actually fit around your machine and you can stitch, but this is embedded in a table, so I'm going to show you which way to angle your fabric. I'm going to choose a triple stitch and I'm going to change the length to 4.0. You test your own stitch, but the triple stitch on a hem like this is a little bit dressier than the cover hem. Cover hem is more for sportswear. And I'm just going to line up my foot here. Now, this ponte knit and the fabric that you saw here on these leggings, it doesn't fray. So you could run this through the serger first to have a nice finish and then do the triple stitch, or just do the triple stitch because you're the only one that's going to see inside your clothes, usually. All right, and see what happens here? The stitch goes forward and backwards and forward and backwards. And this is a real narrow leg. I chose a small, something like this in case you're making kids' leggings, which they love. You just slide this out of the way and stitch a little bit further. And what I'm doing is lining up my hem allowance, the fold, on this side. So that's kind of where my eye is focusing. And I'm just going to go all the way around. And what the triple stitch does is it goes back and forth and it stretches. So you might have seen me do the cover hem where I do the chain stitch. This is very similar. Go a little bit further here. And when I get back, notice I started on a seam. That was the inseam. That's a great place to start because you won't have where the stitches go back and forth over each other. You won't be able to see that. All right, so the inside of my garment looks like this, the raw edge, and the outside looks like this. So obviously you would use a color that's similar to your fabric, but look, it stretches, so you can get this over your foot and it doesn't rip the stitch out. A great stitch to use on leggings and any active wear. So that is how simple it is to make a pair of leggings in under an hour.